React Native versus Flutter versus Xamarin, which cross-platform framework for enterprise? So, React Native development. It's something a lot of people ask about, and today we're going to walk through it step by step. Now, next up, what is cross-platform mobile development and why does it matter for enterprise? Cross-platform mobile development means writing shared code that renders or compiles natively for both iOS and Android, rather than maintaining two separate codebases. For enterprise teams, this is primarily a cost and delivery velocity decision. According to the Stack Overflow Developer Survey 2024, React Native and Flutter both rank among the most widely adopted mobile frameworks globally. React Native has historically led in enterprise adoption, particularly at organizations already running JavaScript or TypeScript stacks. The business case is straightforward. A shared codebase typically cuts mobile development costs by 30 to 50% compared to two native apps. The honest caveat is that you pay for those savings in specific edge cases, particularly around performance-intensive features or apps requiring deep access to platform-specific hardware APIs. Next up, React Native development, capabilities, limitations, and enterprise fit. React Native development sits in the sweet spot for organizations already running a JavaScript or TypeScript web stack. Your web developers can contribute to mobile without learning Dart or C#, which reduces hiring friction and shortens onboarding significantly. Meta continues to invest in the framework. The Hermes JavaScript engine, now the default runtime, improves cold startup time by roughly 40% compared to older V8-based setups. The new architecture replaces the asynchronous bridge with JSI for synchronous native calls, addressing the performance bottlenecks that used to concern enterprise architects most. The community is the primary reason React Native development stays at the top. React Native has the largest collection of third-party libraries among cross-platform frameworks. Most enterprise integrations, whether Stripe, Salesforce, SharePoint, or Azure Active Directory, already have maintained packages available. This cuts time to market on complex enterprise projects meaningfully. Let's talk about now, Flutter versus React Native, how Google and #39's framework competes. Flutter, Google's UI toolkit released in 2018, takes a fundamentally different approach from React Native development. Rather than bridging to native UI components, Flutter renders everything through its own graphics engine. This gives Flutter pixel-perfect consistency across platforms, which is its defining competitive advantage. Because Flutter owns its rendering pipeline, your UI looks identical on iOS, Android, and web. That matters for enterprise apps with strict brand guidelines, financial dashboards, or interfaces where visual consistency must match desktop equivalents exactly. The trade-off: Flutter UIs can look slightly off from native platform conventions. A material design button on iOS renders as a material button, not a Cupertino button. For internal enterprise tools where employees understand they are in a company-specific app, this rarely creates practical friction. Now, let's talk about Xamarin, the Microsoft first choice for enterprise teams. Xamarin uses C# and the .NET runtime, making it the natural fit for Microsoft stack shops. If your backend runs on ASP.NET, your team uses Visual Studio, and your infrastructure lives in Azure, Xamarin and its successor .NET MAUI integrate into existing workflows without requiring a language change. This is where .NET MAUI becomes genuinely compelling beyond already knowing C#. The integration with Azure services is deeper than any other cross-platform framework. Azure Active Directory authentication, Azure App Configuration, Application Insights Telemetry, and Push Notification Hubs all have first-class .NET SDKs with no REST abstraction layer required. For teams undertaking Azure app modernization projects that move legacy enterprise apps to cloud-native architecture, staying in the C# stack simplifies back-end integration significantly. Azure consulting services teams typically find that .NET MAUI mobile builds fit cleanly alongside existing Azure architecture review processes, because deployment patterns and identity configuration are already familiar across the team. Working with an Azure migration partner who understands both .NET and Azure means the mobile and back-end modernization can proceed on a single roadmap rather than two disconnected tracks. Let's talk about next up, head-to-head, React Native versus Flutter versus Xamarin for enterprise. No single framework wins on every dimension. The right choice depends on your team's existing skills, your backend infrastructure, and your app's UX requirements. Now, let's talk about how Azure infrastructure supports your mobile development stack. Regardless of the framework you choose, your mobile app needs a backend. For enterprises in the Microsoft space, Azure Cloud Migration Services provide the hosting, security, and DevOps tooling that mobile apps depend on. Engaging a qualified Azure migration partner early, before the mobile app ships, prevents the post-launch scramble that happens when cloud architecture is treated as an afterthought. Azure DevOps consulting services cover mobile build pipelines just as effectively as web pipelines. You can automate iOS and Android builds using Microsoft-hosted macOS agents, store app signing certificates in Azure Key Vault, and distribute builds via App Center or push directly to app stores. Running Azure security assessment checks as part of the mobile build pipeline, scanning for hard-coded credentials or insecure API endpoint patterns, is straightforward when the pipeline already lives in Azure DevOps. For teams already using Azure DevOps consulting services for web products, extending those pipelines to mobile reduces tooling sprawl and maintains a single audit trail across all deployments. Let's talk about now, when should your enterprise use Power Apps instead of custom mobile development? Not every enterprise mobile need requires React Native development, Flutter, or Xamarin. If the use case involves internal workflows, simple data entry, or connecting to Microsoft 365 data, Power Apps development services often deliver faster results with less overhead. Power Apps is the right call when the app connects to SharePoint, Dynamics 365, or Teams data with minimal backend work. Users are internal employees only. And delivery speed matters more than custom UX polish. As a Power Platform development company, Q Services builds canvas and model-driven apps that go from requirements to production in 4 to 8 weeks, versus 3 to 6 months for a custom cross-platform mobile app. The honest limitation: Power Apps mobile UX is functional but not suited for heavy daily use. For Power BI consulting services integration into mobile interfaces, embedded Power BI dashboards work well for occasional reporting. Teams that need complex data visualization or high-frequency interactions get more value from a properly built React Native or Flutter app. Now, how to choose the right cross-platform framework for your enterprise? The framework choice rarely comes down to one factor. Here is the practical decision logic. The most important variable is team language fluency. Switching languages for mobile development adds 3 to 6 months of ramp-up time, which typically offsets the theoretical advantages of any particular framework. A React Native development project in the hands of a strong JavaScript team will ship faster and with fewer integration issues than a Flutter project where developers are still learning Dart, even if Flutter is the technically superior fit on paper. For teams modernizing existing mobile apps rather than building from scratch, the lift and shift to Azure approach for backends pairs naturally with a framework migration. Teams doing .NET application modernization often find that migrating from Xamarin Forms to .NET MAUI aligns well with backend modernization on the same timeline. A Microsoft Azure consulting company that handles both the mobile and infrastructure layers keeps architecture decisions consistent and avoids the integration gaps that appear when mobile and cloud projects are managed as separate workstreams. Now, conclusion. React Native development, Flutter, and .NET MAUI each solve the cross-platform problem well, but for different teams in different contexts. React Native wins on community size, hiring market, and JavaScript team fit. Flutter wins on rendering consistency and performance ceiling. .NET MAUI wins on Microsoft and Azure integration depth for C# shops. The backend choice matters as much as the front end. Whether you are launching React Native development for a new mobile initiative or modernizing a legacy Xamarin app, pairing your framework with a well-designed Azure backend gives you the observability, security, and scalability that enterprise apps require. Explore how our Azure consulting services support the full stack, from mobile front end to cloud infrastructure. Ready to define your mobile and cloud architecture? Get a mobile architecture consultation with Q Services. As a trusted Microsoft Azure consulting company and cross-platform mobile development partner, we will help you choose the right framework, design the Azure backend, and build a delivery roadmap tailored to your team's skills and your organization's goals.